Hey, Scott Jordan here for Jancast number 206, February 5th, 2026. Boy, it's getting cold. I don't know where you are that's listening to when you're listening to this podcast, but the last week or two in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, it's been crazy cold. Like 15 degrees. We got 6 or 7 inches of snow. Lots of sales for winter rinse and liquid ice melt, but nope. It's going to be a little while longer. Punxsutawney Phil apparently saw his shadow, so that means we have 6 more weeks of winter ahead of us. Isn't that great to look forward to? So Jancast has a history of reporting on pathogens and all that pre-pandemic. We were into it, and then really got into it during the pandemic, calling out airlines that are making false soft surfaces claims, all kinds of stuff. But we have a real outbreak that's kind of gradually building, and I kind of can see why it's gradually building. And maybe you haven't run into it, but measles are something we need to worry about. Right now, the threat's kind of breaking out, and South Carolina is the hot spot, New Jersey, Philadelphia's had it, and as well as Ohio. The good news is it's not that difficult to deal with. But let's go through some of the main facts, and you could certainly use this as a reference. We don't publicly kind of go out of our way to push products, even though Bullen does have quite a few that are approved for use against measles. But as I'll get into it a little bit further here, it's not that difficult to kill it. It's more about process and procedures than anything else. And I guess one of the procedures would have been maybe getting some vaccinations before the threat comes around. So the big problem with measles is, unlike kind of some of the stuff we went through with COVID, back then we didn't know what the problem was. Was it airborne? Was it not? We were cleaning vegetables. We were cleaning all kinds of surfaces. People were washing down their bodies. Well, measles is pretty clearly defined as to how it's spread, and it's mainly an airborne threat. It is driven by surface contact, but it's primarily airborne. And the most important thing is to kind of go back to stuff that we covered in Jancast number 170 with Dinesh of Think Light Air, who kind of talked about the fact that, back during the pandemic, we were cleaning, let's say, in the school environment, we were cleaning between each class, but not giving any time for things to settle down between those cleanings. And it end up, and again, you can hear on the Jancast number 170, I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But it talked, Think Light Air was able to determine that if we had a short period of no activity after the cleaning, that dramatically improved the situation. So the same is true with measles, and that the stuff we need to worry about can remain airborne for up to 2 hours. So we have to give at least a 2-hour window and then include air handling as one of the top priorities. So again, pretty routine stuff, but if you get the steps that we need to worry about, containment, make sure the air handling is done properly. You can get the things like finer particles like a HEPA filtration and things like that. But let's start out by being aware that it's airborne driven in most cases. And if you have any outbreaks at all, you have to close off that area, quarantine that area for at least 2 hours. And then you can go in and do your disinfectant steps afterwards. And there's a lot of products that are available because the measles is a envelope virus, which means it's not that difficult to. What the envelope virus means is kind of like a shell around the bad stuff. And there's a whole bunch of products that are effective against envelope viruses, which would include anything that kills influenza, RSV, a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you need a list of products, it certainly can get you that info. Again, back to the air quality, air exchange where possible, increase ventilation, use HEPA filtration, isolate all the stuff that you need to isolate, particularly if you've actually have an outbreak. So you're already going to be doing your disinfectant cleaning anyway. So why not use a product that's effective against measles, and you get two bangs for your buck? You're going to, nowadays with influenza and everything else, it's a good idea for doing surface disinfection. And that's also where you need to deal with measles, because there aren't any products that are going to kill it in the air, but it will kill it once it ends up on the surface. Again, another important thing is communications with the staff. They have to be aware of what they're looking for, and some of those the symptoms like fever, rash, and all that. And you can find more notes specifically. And I think my AI host who's going to follow up with the inside intelligence version of this briefing on measles would agree. So summary is measles are extremely easy to inactivate, focuses on air handling, isolating exposed rooms, maintaining your standard cleaning program. Let's hear what the AI co-host now has to say.
All right, let's talk about a virus that's making a major comeback, measles. Now, after everything we've been through in the last few years, you'd think we're all pros at fighting viruses. But you're about to find out that fighting this old enemy, well, it requires a completely different playbook. Let's dive in. You know the drill, right? We've all spent years focused on hand sanitizer, wiping down every surface we can see. And those instincts are good. But what if I told you that for measles, some of those habits could actually give you a false sense of security? We're not just fighting a different bug here, we're up against a totally different kind of threat. So, measles is one of the most contagious viruses on the planet. Seriously. And with vaccination rates dipping in some places, it's finding plenty of new chances to spread. The question is, what did we learn from the last pandemic that actually helps us here? And more importantly, what bad habits do we need to unlearn fast? To really build the right defense against measles, we have to start with the single most critical, #1 fact about how it spreads. And let me tell you, it's probably not what you've been conditioned to think about. Okay, here it is. The #1 threat, the main event, is airborne aerosols. We're talking about tiny, microscopic droplets that just hang in the air, sometimes for hours. Contaminated surfaces? Yeah, they're a concern, but they are a distant second. And that right there, that single fact changes absolutely everything. Our whole defense plan has to be refocused on the air we're breathing. And here's why that's so incredibly important. The measles virus can stay alive, infectious, and just floating in the air of a room for up to 2 hours after a sick person has walked out. Think about that for a second. 2 full hours. You could walk into a completely empty room and still be at risk. This is why our old pandemic habits need a major reboot. You can scrub every single surface until it gleams, but if the virus is just suspended in the air above you, you haven't even touched the main route of transmission. Surface cleaning is important, for sure, but it's a supporting actor. It is not the star of this show. So this brings us to this really interesting paradox about measles. For a virus that is so unbelievably contagious in the air, it's actually surprisingly weak when it lands on a surface. It's kind of like a glass cannon, you know? Incredibly powerful, but with a major weak spot. And understanding that weakness is our key to fighting it. Let's break down the science just a tiny bit. I promise it's easy. Measles is what's called an enveloped virus. See that outer layer? It's basically a fragile little bubble of fat. And while that bubble is crucial for the virus to infect you, it's also its Achilles heel, because it's super easy to break down with just regular old disinfectants. And here is the absolute best part. You don't have to go out and buy some crazy special measles killer spray. Nope. The standard EPA-registered disinfectants you already have for the flu, for RSV, for coronaviruses, they work perfectly. The tools you need to win this fight are probably already in your supply closet. All right, so we get it now, right? The threat is in the air, but the virus itself is weak on surfaces. So what do we do about it? Let's turn all this knowledge into a really smart, actionable defense plan. Look, it all boils down to this really simple 3-part plan. It's totally logical, it's super effective, and it follows a crystal clear order of priorities. Manage the air first, then the space, and finally, the surfaces. Let's break down exactly what that means. So, step 1, the absolute top priority is always the air. Always. What does that mean for you? It means doing whatever you can to increase ventilation and filtration. Can you crank up your HVAC system to pull in more fresh outdoor air? Can you put portable HEPA filters in high-risk spots like a school nurse's office or a waiting room? These are the moves that directly attack the virus right where it wants to live. Now, step 2 is isolation, and honestly, this is a total game changer. If you think someone with measles was in a room, your first instinct might be to rush in and start cleaning, right? Wrong. The smartest move is to close the door, seal it off, and just wait. Let time and your ventilation system do the hard work. After that critical 2-hour window, the airborne risk takes a nosedive, and then it's safe for your cleaning crew to go in and handle the surfaces.
And that brings us to step 3, smart, focused cleaning. Look, just because it's not priority number 1 doesn't mean it's not important. Good hygiene is still a crucial part of the whole picture. But we're not just cleaning everything blindly. We're focusing our energy on the high-touch areas where the virus is most likely to be. It's all about being efficient and effective. So let's pull all this together. We've walked through the threat, we've unpacked the paradox of this virus, and we've laid out the plan. We now know what makes measles so different, and more importantly, we know exactly how to fight it. So let's bring this all home.
If you remember one thing from all of this, let it be this quote. It says everything. This isn't about doing more work, it's about doing the right work in the right order. Air first, then time and space, then surfaces. It's a clear, simple strategy, and it works.
So there you have it. The playbook is on the table. The knowledge is clear, it's actionable. The real question is no longer what do we do, but will we do it? Are our schools, our healthcare facilities, and our public spaces truly ready to shift their focus from the habits of the last pandemic to meet the needs of this one? That's the thought I'll leave you with. Thanks for tuning in.